So it kind of, for me, Don and I moved to the inner city of Buffalo, New York, planted a church among the urban poor. And what we found was the prevailing narrative of that day was shaped by the church growth movement. And I actually spoke at the 50th anniversary of the publication of Bridges of God, which is McGavern's kind of seminal work that launches the church growth movement. And so I spoke at Fuller Seminary at the American Society of Church Growth. And it was, in some sense, what I wrote was biographical. And I wrote, I think the title was The Growth, the Birth, the Growth, and the Death of the Church Growth Movement, which, again, I was speaking this at the American Society for Church Growth, which has now renamed itself. But the point was, I grew into ministry at a time when the church growth movement, and that's like a movement. When we say church growth, when Alan says church growth, when I say church growth, we're not meaning growing churches. Right. There's a movement that McGavern sort of launched, who was a missiologist. C. Peter Wagner sort of took over, and it became much more methodologically driven, formulaic, almost, I would say, methodological mania. And so that was where I kind of came up in. And, I'm planting a church as a bivocational contractor, doing home insulation and renovation. And I'm still reading these things. I'm like, these things are not all, my experience in, hear what Alan said, contextual church planting led me to saying something's not here where I'd want it to be. So planted another church in suburb of Erie, Pennsylvania. Began to do some more. I was actually studying with Elmer Towns, one of the godfathers of the church growth movement. Did a master's degree with him, and let me say, deeply thankful for his speaking into my life and helping my learning. When I was in Erie, Pennsylvania, I did a doctor of ministry and started to engage more of the missiological literature, some of the things I wrote. But it was actually when I was doing my PhD, one of the professors there, actually, I dedicated planting new churches in a postmodern age to someone that most of our listeners wouldn't have heard of. His name is Mark Terry. He's written several, John Mark Terry, History of Evangelism. And the dedication to planting new churches in a postmodern age, it actually tells you of the mental shift that I was going through. I wrote, I knew the hows of church planting, but you taught me the whys of mission. And I think that was the shift. It was reading God Who Sends, which just rocked me. It's like mission is rooted in the identity of God himself, again. And so I think, though, it's interesting, though, for both of us, and I think for a lot of people, it was the church planting conversation, which in some ways was a different path and maybe rejected some of the assumptions of the church growth movement that caused us to look more deeply to mission. So when I did my PhD, people said to me, why don't you, the church growth was the thing. Fuller Seminary is all about the church growth movement, the church growth institutes. And I looked at it, I said, I don't want to do a PhD in church growth. That was the thing. Most of those are gone now. And I said, I think mission is the discipline that we're going to need to engage the cultural moment. And later I would say to engage any and all cultural moments, but at that time to engage the cultural moment. So I went the path to be a missiologist, which was back then. Now, PhDs in mission, well, you're getting your PhD in that. Yeah. But when I was in my 20s and started down this path, PhDs in missions didn't do it in Western culture focused. Right. And so, as a matter of fact, I think there were just like a handful of us. And people thought, why'd you do your PhD? Why'd you study missions if you're going to be focused on Western culture? And so still to this day, I'm thankful that I think church planting led me to the missional conversation. And probably my first articulation of that is in the little blue book called Planting New Churches in a Postmodern Age, which someone said to me, because it actually, and the book really sold a lot of copies. I was really surprised. It was actually an academic book, but someone said to me, a pastor of an established church, he said, I read it for the half that was about mission. And that was their introduction. It was sort of the gateway into the mission conversation was in and around contextualized church planting. And I think Alan's story kind of resonates with that.
Yeah, a lot of overlap and similarities. So, missional movements, organizing church around the idea God's a sending God, God's a God on mission, and then also seeing the West as a mission field, I guess. So these are some of the big ideas that are taking shape. They're seeping into you.
And those things you just said, 40 years ago, people would find those controversial.
Sure.
And now probably everyone listening is like, well, of course you should see the West as a mission field. So
Yeah.
the shift is substantive.
That's right. That's right.